My fellow Americans, I have today ordered to Vietnam the Air Mobile Division. This will make it necessary to increase our active fighting forces by raising the monthly draft call and for us to step up our campaign for voluntary enlistments. We did not choose to be the guardians at the gate, but there is no one else.
I enlisted 19 November 1965. I happened to have a college degree and did okay on the OCT score, so they said, would you like to be an officer? I said, sure, why not? So I went straight from basic and AIT to infantry OCS at Fort Bragg. The distinguished graduates from OCS were given the opportunity, if they wanted to go join Special Forces. I was a little bit colorblind. In jump school, you had to read the little book that has the circles that have numbers in them, and I couldn't read but about a third of them. But somebody told me, look, you put a $20 bill in that book when you hand it back to the medic, and he'll hand you a different book, and the number's written in the upper right-hand corner of the page, so that's what I did. So that let me go to jump school and got me as far as, well, it got me all the way through, really. I ended up initially in B Company 6 Special Forces Group. When I got to Vietnam, I was assigned to this Special Forces Group, and there, of all people, was Larry O'Neill, my basic training company commander. He said, where the hell are you going, Burrus? I said, up to I Corps, sir. He said, no, you're not. You're coming to the Mike Force with me. So he took me straight into 8503, then the Trag Mike Force, which was the countrywide mobile reaction force for the 5th Group Commander.
Bucky's he's creative energy. And he did things for the right reasons. And he's very emotional about his commitment to the country. So people saw the strengths he had. And in fact, he ended up serving 2 tours in Vietnam with the Mike Force. And he served in other capacities in between there before eventually going to the advanced course. And then going on to serve in the conventional army in Germany. And after that, he returned to Bragg.
When I left Germany and went back to Fort Bragg to Special Forces, I was assigned to B Company 2nd Battalion 5th Group, which actually was the same B team that I had been in Vietnam. While I was there, I got a slot to the military free fall course. I was probably the worst student they ever had in military free fall. But when I graduated, my sergeant major said that Sir Bill Edge wants to see you. He was the JFK Center Sergeant Major, which was the highest Sergeant Major slot in Special Forces at the time. He said, you're taking over the Halo Committee. I said, Sergeant Major, I was the worst student they ever said. He said, oh, a hoot. Said, this is it's a leadership job. They're running a skydiving school down there, and they wanted you to go down and turn it back into a school. So I did. One day I came out of a meeting with my NCOs, and I walked out, and there was this big, burly, full colonel with a white flash on his beret. The only people that wear white flashes are of a training group, and the only 06 in training group was the director of the schools. It was Charlie Allen Beckwith. And he said, who the hell are you, boy? I said, sir, I'm Captain Burrus. I'm your Halo Committee Chief. And he said, we ain't doing nothing but running the skydiving school down there. And I said, well, yes, sir. But are you Halo qualified, Colonel? And he said, oh, no. I said, because I thought I was going to get ripped anyway. So I said, well, you got some real problems at Camp McCall and the O&I committee, so I suggest you go take care of those. If you don't like the way I'm running the Halo committee, fire me. So he looked at me real hard for a minute and then poked me on the shoulder and said, me and you going to get on all right, boy.
We all know about Charlie Beckwith. Charlie Beckwith could be, a bull in a china cabinet. He could, he's a tough dude. But Bucky, he had people's respect, which is important. So, I think he was a real factor, in us moving ahead.
Colonel Beckwith had this idea that he'd been trying to get accepted for a long time of establishing an SAS type unit in the U.S. Army. He sent a couple of guys over. They didn't really do too well. So I went to him and said, Colonel, I can do that course. He said, well, first place, you're too old. I was 35 by then. So I said, well, you never know if you don't. Let me try. So I did. I went to Hereford to SAS selection course and managed to squeak through that. And by the time I got back, the authority to establish that special mission unit that he had been trying to establish ever since he had been an exchange officer was granted. And I was fortunate enough to be included with him and one other officer on the first set of orders to go there.
I was mentored, is probably the best word that I can say, from a very young age by all of these people that would come in and out of the house and spend holidays with us. I learned that these are some of the most foundational leaders of their generation throughout the DoD. So to me, it was very normal that people like Uncle Pete were going to come over for lunch. And it was really probably when I went to the Air Force Academy and I sat in a military history class and they started to go through a lesson on Operation Eagleclaw that I had this very kind of aha foundational moment to say, this is the dinner time story that I grew up with. You know, I found myself raising my hand and correcting the teacher on a couple points or adding some background. And I started to get those questions of, how do you know that?
You know, when we first formed up, Bucky was the squadron commander. We only had one squadron. And I was one of two captains that were selected to command the subordinate troops. Jerry Boykin had one and I had the other. We were captains. Bucky was a major at the time.
Colonel Beckford had said all along that we're going to need 18 months to 2 years to get this mission. You're going to get the right men selected for it and to get the unit trained and ready to do its mission. And so after about 18 months, we had an evaluation exercise, and they determined that we were now ready to conduct the mission of that special mission unit. That night we were sort of celebrating in Beckwith's room. We're in the old World War II barracks. And our liaison came in and said, hey, there's some students who have just taken over the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. And that, of course, was the genesis of what later became known as Eagleclaw, the attempt to rescue American hostages from Tehran.
At that time, I had replaced Bucky as a squadron commander. So I commanded the Red Element on Eagleclaw and had, along with Logan Fitch, who had the White Element. We were the two assault groups that were going into the compound to clear it itself to get the hostages. So we spent most of our time dealing with sources and agents and, you know, all the intelligence that was coming. We had people with experience in the country that could give us detailed information on the inside of things. So, you know, Bucky at this time was the ops officer, so you could imagine, you know, his job was to organize all this and gather and focus it.
I first met Lieutenant Colonel Burruss, who we called Bucky, during the Eagleclaw execution phase, if you will, where he introduced us to what targets we were going to fire on during the mission if fire was required. So President Carter had first came down with a mandate that he didn't want to use lethal force, not at all, unless it was an absolute emergency and our people were under attack. So we, the gunship, could not respond with lethal fires, and the idea came up through the Carter administration that we would fire CS gas to hold the crowds back. Gas was not going to work. Bucky knew gas wasn't going to work. So Bucky, being Bucky and being clever, says, okay, we can do this, but here's how we're going to do this. So we will abide by the president's order, but I'm not going to put my guys at risk because we had to use gas only.
Again, I'd take a look at Bucky's leadership style, and it absolutely is care of his subordinates. That doesn't mean that there's not a responsibility to higher headquarters, and I'm talking about genuine care.
He and I actually rode in to go. We were on the second talon to go in, and you know, everything didn't go well on that. And Bucky was part of the provided a lot of the cohesion that was required. leadership, and kept the momentum going for what we're doing. He can be trouble when you're having fun, but when the chips are down, he can be a pretty cool head.
So not long after I retired, General Sam Wilson called me up and said, "Burrus, how'd you like to go to Congress?" I said, "General, thank you, but I don't like the town, don't like the people, don't like the institution." And he said, "I don't give a damn for it, it's a mission." So off I went to the House of Representatives. I was a professional staff member on the House Armed Services Committee, especially for the establishment of U.S. Special Operations Command.
I have both friends and people that I've grown up with who will come up to me and say continuously, "Well, your dad is one of my heroes." And I always smile and say, "Well, that's convenient. He's mine too." But in practicum, I've had that opportunity to pick up the phone and where people will say, "Hey, Bucky, this is what we have going on. What do you think?" To me, it's, "Hey, Dad, I need some advice." And that has been an irreplaceable gift that I've had my entire career. Special operations predate Special Operations Command, and being able to have that legacy and history of a man who lived it and served it as a Green Beret, and then who helped shepherd that through into the greatest fighting force in the world is an honor and a privilege that I get to carry on.